When the Pinecrest Gardens HOA blocked my entire driveway with 5 massive shipping containers, they had no idea. They just declared war on their own landlord. How would they react when they discovered the quiet homeowner they'd been harassing for months actually owned the very building where they collected their precious HOA fees? I spat out my coffee. When I looked out my front window, 5 giant, metal shipping containers sat in my driveway, blocking my garage completely. My car was trapped inside, and I had a meeting in 40 minutes. What the heck is this? I shouted to no one, rushing outside in my bathrobe and slippers. The containers were massive, rusty, blue metal boxes, stacked nearly to the second floor of my house. My neighbor Diane stood in her yard, watering plants, with a smug smile on her face. She wore her usual outfit: beige pants, crisp white blouse, and that gold HOA president pin she never took off. "Morning, James," she called. Way too cheerful. Quite the surprise, isn't it? I stormed toward her, pointing at the metal wall blocking my driveway. "Did you do this? How am I supposed to get to work?" Diane put her watering can down slowly, like she was enjoying every second. "The Pinecrest Gardens HOA voted last week," she said. "These containers are being stored here temporarily. We sent notices to everyone. Actually, we can," she said. "It's in the HOA agreement. Section 12.3. Temporary use of common spaces for community improvement projects. Your driveway extends onto community property by exactly 4 feet. That's not true. We measured yesterday." She pointed to faint chalk marks on the pavement. Richard and Karen confirmed it. Of course they did. Richard and Karen, Diane's 2 favorite HOA committee members, who spent their retirement measuring grass height and counting how many Christmas lights people put up. "This is ridiculous. I'm calling a tow truck," I said, reaching for my phone. Diane's smile faded. "That would violate HOA rules. You'll be fined $500 per container. Moved without permission." She turned back toward her house. "Board meeting tonight at 7. You're welcome to file a complaint then." I stood there in my slippers, fuming. 5 years I'd lived in Pinecrest Gardens. 5 years of petty rules and power trips. My mailbox was non-regulation blue last month. My bird feeder was attracting non-approved wildlife the month before that. Inside, I called my boss to explain I'd be working from home. Then I phoned every towing company in town. None would touch the containers without HOA approval. My doorbell rang at noon. It was Mrs. Patel from across the street, holding a casserole dish. "I brought lunch," she said quietly. "I saw what they did. It's not right." Mrs. Patel was the neighborhood grandma. Had lived here 30 years. Before the HOA even existed. We sat at my kitchen table while I explained my predicament. "Diane's been after me since I moved in," I said between bites of amazing butter chicken. "But this is next level." "She does this," Mrs. Patel nodded. "Picks one person each year to make an example of. Last year it was the Millers. Their son's basketball hoop was unsightly. They moved away." "Well, I'm not moving," I said firmly. "I've worked too hard for this house." After Mrs. Patel left, I dug through my home office for my property documents. The HOA agreement was thicker than a phone book. As I flipped through endless pages of rules, my phone dinged with an email notification. It was from my property management company. Monthly rent collection summary. Westland Commercial Properties. I clicked it open absently. Still reading the HOA rules. The list of businesses who paid rent to my company. Scrolled by. Near the bottom, one name. Made me stop breathing for a second. Pinecrest Gardens Homeowners Association. Wait, what? I scrolled back up. There it was. The HOA rented their office space in a small commercial building nearby. A building I had purchased through my company, Westland Properties, 8 years ago, as an investment. The same company that sent the rent statement I was looking at. I laughed so hard. Tears came to my eyes. The HOA had no idea. They were renting from me. I'd bought the property through my LLC. And my property manager handled everything. They had no clue that James Reynolds and Westland Properties were the same person. My phone buzzed with a text from Karen. Your garden gnomes exceed height restrictions by 2.3 inches. $150 fine will be added to your HOA dues. I walked to my window and looked at the shipping containers. Then at my poor garden gnomes, who had apparently committed the crime of being too tall. Then I checked the HOA lease details on my laptop. Their lease renewal was due in exactly 27 days. The 7 p.m. HOA meeting would be interesting tonight. Very interesting indeed. I straightened my tie in the mirror before leaving for the community center. For once, I was actually looking forward to an HOA meeting. Walking was my only option, thanks to my imprisoned car. Along the way, neighbors gave me sympathetic looks. Some quickly averted their eyes, afraid to be seen showing support. The community center was packed. I spotted Diane at the front table, with Richard and Karen, all shuffling importantly, looking at papers. Karen's gray bob haircut was so stiff it didn't move. When she nodded at something Richard whispered to her. I took a seat in the back row. Mrs. Patel gave me a small wave from across the room. Let us call this meeting to order, Diane announced, tapping her gavel unnecessarily. First, the new container storage project. A slideshow appeared on the wall. Pinecrest Gardens Community Enhancement Initiative. Read the first slide. With a stock photo of happy people in a park. As you know, Diane continued, we've entered an exciting partnership with Loytrans Shipping. They're paying us $2,000 monthly to store containers temporarily on community property. Richard stood up. This income will fund our new decorative street signs and additional surveillance cameras. A man in the front row raised his hand. Where exactly are these containers being stored? There's 5 of them, blocking James Reynolds' driveway. All eyes turned to me. Mr. Reynolds' driveway extends 4 feet onto common property, Karen stated, reading from her clipboard. According to Section 12.3, I measured my property line this afternoon. I interrupted. My driveway is fully within my property boundaries. Karen's face flushed. Our measurements were wrong, I finished. I have my original property survey right here. I held up the document. Nothing in the HOA agreement allows you to block access to my home. Diane cleared her throat. We've determined it's temporary community storage space. You've determined? I asked, standing up. Was there a vote on specifically using my driveway? The room grew uncomfortable. Mrs. Peterson, from 2 doors down, spoke up. I don't remember voting on whose driveway would be blocked. It was an executive decision, Richard said, his voice hardening. Sometimes leadership requires making tough choices. I walked slowly to the front of the room. Let me understand this. You've signed a deal to make money by storing containers. And you're putting them in front of my house. Without my permission? The needs of the community outweigh individual inconvenience. Karen said firmly. This benefits everyone. Except me, I replied. I can't use my garage. I can't access my car. Karen sniffed. Perhaps you should carpool. Until the project is complete. Murmurs rippled through the room. Even HOA supporters looked uncomfortable. How long will the containers be there? Someone asked. 6 to 8 months. Richard answered. The room erupted. Even for rule-following Pinecrest Gardens. This was too much. I raised my hand. Until the noise settled. I have a question. Diane nodded, reluctantly. Does everyone know who owns the building? Where the HOA office is located? Confusion spread across the room. Karen glanced at Diane, who frowned. Westland Properties is our landlord. She stated. Why is that relevant? I smiled. Feeling a strange calm come over me. Just wondering if you've met the owner. Since your lease is up for renewal next month. Diane's eyes narrowed. We deal with a management company. This is completely off topic, Mr. Reynolds. Is it? I took out my business card and placed it on their table. James Reynolds, CEO, Westland Properties LLC. The room went so quiet. You could hear the air conditioning hum. Karen picked up the card. Her hand trembling slightly. Her eyes widened. As she showed it to Diane. This meeting is adjourned. Diane announced suddenly. Her voice cracking. We'll continue this discussion at a later date. As people filed out, whispering excitedly. Mrs. Patel caught up with me. You own their building? She asked. Eyes twinkling. For 8 years, I confirmed. They never bothered to check who was behind the company name. Richard approached us. His face tense. This changes nothing, he said quietly. The container agreement is already signed. Interesting, I replied. Because I was just thinking about how the HOA office would look with some renovations. The kind that might require tenants to vacate for, 6 to 8 months. His face paled. Just an idea, I added with a smile. I should go home and sleep on it. Big day tomorrow. As I walked away, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. This isn't over, Reynolds. I looked back at the community center, where Diane, Richard, and Karen huddled in intense conversation, occasionally glancing my way. The shipping containers still blocked my driveway. But somehow, they didn't bother me quite as much anymore. The real battle had just begun. I woke to the sound of engines. Lots of engines. Jumping out of bed, I rushed to my window to find 3 news vans parked on my street. Reporters with microphones stood in front of my container-blocked driveway. A drone buzzed overhead, filming the scene. My doorbell rang frantically. When I opened it, a woman with a microphone thrust it toward my face. Mr. Reynolds, Channel 8 News. Can you tell our viewers how it feels to be trapped in your home by your own HOA? How did you? I started. But she continued talking. Sources tell us the Pinecrest Gardens HOA has blocked your driveway with shipping containers. Is this true? My phone buzzed nonstop with text messages from neighbors. OMG, you're on the morning news. Diane is freaking out. Go get M. James. I blinked at the camera. Still in my pajamas. Yes. That's correct. Within minutes. I'd given 4 interviews from my front porch. Social media exploded. With hashtag HOA nightmare and hashtag containergate hashtags. Someone had posted photos of my blocked driveway online. And the story had gone viral overnight. By noon, the HOA's phone was ringing off the hook. I know because Karen called me. Her voice tight with anger. "What have you done?" she hissed. "We're getting calls from all over the country." "I didn't call the media," I said truthfully. "Maybe someone at the meeting last night did." "This is damaging our community's reputation," she insisted. "You need to tell them it's being resolved." "Is it?" I asked. "Because there are still 5 shipping containers blocking my driveway." She hung up on me. My lawyer, Samantha, arrived at 2 p.m., stepping carefully around news crews. In her immaculate suit. "Well," she said once we were inside, "you've certainly caused a stir." I showed her the property documents. And the HOA lease. What can they actually do? Can they really block my driveway like this? She adjusted her glasses. Reviewing the paperwork. Not legally, no. They're violating local ordinances. About emergency access, for starters. So I can have them towed? Yes, but, she tapped her pen thoughtfully. You have something much more interesting here. With the building lease. Their renewal is coming up. And as the landlord, you have considerable leverage. I don't want to evict them, I admitted. I just want them to stop the power trips. And remove these containers. Samantha smiled. Then let's draft some new lease terms. As she typed on her laptop, Mrs. Patel knocked on my back door. Sneaking through yards to avoid the media. "James, it's chaos. Diane called an emergency HOA meeting for tonight. They're saying you orchestrated this whole media circus to embarrass them." I sighed. I didn't call any reporters. Did you? She grinned mischievously. My grandson might have posted something. On that TikTok thing. He has many followers. I laughed. Quiet Mrs. Patel. Causing trouble with social media. Who would have guessed? There's more, she continued, lowering her voice. Loitran Shipping called Diane. They don't want bad publicity. And are threatening to cancel their container contract. That explained the commotion. I'd heard from Diane's house earlier. What sounded like a vase smashing against a wall. After Mrs. Patel left, Samantha finished drafting our proposal. This gives them 2 options, she explained. Either they keep their office space under new terms, or they find somewhere else to rent. Within 30 days. The new terms were simple. Immediate removal of the containers. A public apology. Changes to the HOA board structure. To prevent future abuses of power. And a rewrite of some of the more ridiculous rules. It's reasonable. Not vindictive, Samantha assured me. Courts would view this favorably. If they try to fight it. As evening approached, the media circus grew. Someone had ordered pizzas for the reporters, who now camped on the sidewalk. My phone wouldn't stop ringing. Calls from neighbors, news outlets, even a Hollywood producer. Interested in option rights to my story. I dressed carefully for the emergency meeting. Business casual. Nothing flashy. The last thing I wanted was to look like I was gloating. Walking toward the community center, I noticed Richard taking photos of my house from different angles. When he saw me, he quickly pocketed his phone and hurried away. The meeting room was packed beyond capacity. People from neighboring communities, had shown up after seeing the news. Diane, Richard, and Karen sat at the front, looking grim. Diane called for order, her voice strained. This emergency session will address the current situation with the storage containers and the resulting media attention, which Mr. Reynolds orchestrated. Karen interjected, pointing at me. Several people booed. I was surprised by the support. I didn't contact any media, I stated calmly. But the containers are real. And they're illegally blocking my property. Richard stood, holding up photos. We have documentation proving the containers are on community property. And we have satellite images showing your fence extends beyond your property line by nearly 2 feet. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. They were trying to flip the script. Make me the rule breaker. I looked at the photos. Those are doctored. My property line was professionally surveyed just last year. Convenient claim, Karen sniffed. Do you have proof? Actually, said a voice from the doorway. I do. Everyone turned to see Mr. Goldstein, the county surveyor, standing there with official-looking maps. He'd been my poker buddy for years, though few in the neighborhood knew that. James asked me to verify his property boundaries this morning, Mr. Goldstein announced, unrolling a large map on the center table. Not only is his driveway completely within his property, but the HOA has actually encroached on his land by placing these containers here, here, and here. He pointed to specific spots. Richard's face turned red. This is just your friend helping you. Mr. Goldstein is the county's official surveyor. I replied calmly. Are you questioning his professional integrity? The room grew tense. Diane whispered urgently to Karen, who was frantically texting someone. Furthermore, I continued, I've had my lawyer review the HOA agreement. Nothing in it permits blocking access to a resident's home, regardless of where property lines fall. We had no choice, Diane insisted. The Loitrans contract required specific placement. So you prioritized money over a homeowner's access to their property? Asked Mrs. Peterson loudly. That's not what an HOA is supposed to do. Others voiced agreement. The mood in the room was shifting dramatically. Karen stood up, her voice shrill. This meeting is about Mr. Reynolds' vindictive attempt to damage our community's reputation. He's threatening our HOA office lease because of a personal vendetta. I remained calm. I haven't threatened anything. But as your landlord, I am concerned about how the HOA is being run. You became our landlord in secret. Richard shouted. You never disclosed this conflict of interest. There was no conflict until you blocked my driveway. I pointed out. I've been a hands-off landlord for 8 years. The property management company handles everything. Samantha stood beside me now, handing copies of our proposal to Diane, Richard, and Karen. My client is offering reasonable terms for lease renewal. They scanned the documents, their expressions darkening. This is blackmail, Diane hissed. It's negotiation, Samantha corrected. My client has no obligation to renew your lease under the previous terms. The crowd murmured, trying to understand what was happening. Mrs. Patel stood up. Perhaps, she suggested in her gentle voice, we should all see these new terms, since this affects our whole community. Samantha nodded, distributing more copies. As people read, excited conversation filled the room. Elimination of fines for minor infractions. Board elections every year, instead of every 5. Rules can be changed by community vote, not just board decision. The energy was palpable. Many residents had suffered under the current regime, but had been too intimidated to speak up. Diane banged her gavel desperately. This is outrageous. He can't dictate how our HOA operates just because he owns the building. Actually, Samantha interjected, he's not dictating anything. He's offering a lease renewal with conditions. You're free to find another location if you prefer. A voice called from the back. How much are we paying for rent anyway? And where would that money come from? If not our HOA dues? Diane's face paled. The financial records were supposed to be transparent, but many residents realized they'd never actually seen them. Just then, the doors burst open. A man in a Loytrans shipping uniform strode in, looking furious. Which one of you is Diane Mercer? He demanded. Your containers need to be moved immediately. This PR nightmare is violating our contract terms.